here recently in Europe, you know, in the middle of Europe. So it's when you are hungry, you know.
All right, I think that we have 11 people, including ourselves. Should we start?
Yes.
Okay, so we start. Kristen Mallia is our person of the day today. So I want to say the little story that once upon a time, there was a cool show installed on the premises of the Midway Gallery. 8 daring, young, creative, professionally adventurous people were presenting the thesis projects under the direction of their professor of Suffolk, Kristen Mallia. And I said to myself, all right, to teach those folks so well and to make sure that their artistic individualities, personalities are not only preserved but also strengthened, Madam Professor should be herself enjoying a very strong artistic personality of her own. And professionally adventurous, creative, daring, etc., etc., etc. And you're going to see the proof of that stance right away. Kristen, all yours now.
Thank you, Olga. Famous last words, let me share my screen.
Turn the sound a little bit up. I can't.
Can you guys see this?
Yes.
All right, we're in business.
Can mute yourself too.
So obviously, as Olga said, I'm Kristen. I just moved to the 6th floor here at Midway in December. I am a multimedia artist and I have a graphic design practice. As Mallia Design, I work primarily with small local brands within the arts and hospitality here in Boston. I've been the creative director for Paris Creperie in Coolidge Corner for nearly a decade and have been the designer for their newest location, Paris Seaport, which is just around the corner on Seaport Boulevard. I am an assistant professor at Suffolk University, and I'm currently wrapping up summer classes at BU, where I've taught for the past 3 years. As Olga referenced, my Suffolk students had the privilege of hosting their graduate thesis exhibition in the Midway Gallery shortly after I moved in here, and with so much support from everybody here in this community, which I'm so grateful for. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my work and introduce myself. I am so excited to be joining the Midway community. You guys have no idea. I also want to thank you, Olga, for #1, inviting me to chat about my work, but also for putting together this series. I feel like it's just so awesome to get to learn about what people are doing here. I'm just so excited to see what's happening and to see how we can learn from each other. So thank you. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing a bit about my non-client-based work, my studio work, and my processes. I should also note that in spring of 2020, I was an artist in residence at Skafel Center for Visual Art in Seyðisfjörður, Iceland. Seyðisfjörður is a remote fjord on the east coast of Iceland with a population of about 650 people. I'm starting off with some images from my time there because Iceland is largely responsible for the work I'm going to share tonight and for most of what I've been obsessed with since 2020. And of course, if you've passed through the hallways on the 6th floor, you can probably guess which work is mine based on some of these images. I also want to point out, like, my Wi-Fi has been glitchy all week, so if you lose me or I'm talking and nobody can hear me, please just interrupt me. All right, so diving right in, my work investigates collection, preservation, and performance through installation, time-based media, and printed matter. I'm interested in the accumulation and evolution of behavior, content, and form over time. I navigate identity through locality, histories, objects, and rituals. How does time impact collection and meaning? How can narratives be constructed and preserved? Rituals define us and are often directly related to place, to locations, both generally as geography and more specifically in relation to the concept of home as a sort of memorial site and a place of comfort, security, and history. And memory keeping and identity for me are always tied to specific landscapes. I'm a creature of habit, which is something I talk about a lot. And often my work begins as a series of small daily gestures that I'll dip into when I'm moved to do so. And I'll often use Instagram as a platform for accountability, as a public stage for different rituals and performances. And the collector in me also likes to watch the growth that occurs in this space. Instagram provides an archive for these actions, and it's an opportunity to examine how word and image work together as well. So I'm going to start with the Performative Selfie series, which is kind of it started out as a fun little experiment, and it's continued since 2018, I think. But essentially, I'm somebody who's not comfortable with selfies or selfie culture. So the Performative Selfie series essentially began as an investigation of the image manipulation that takes place via apps like MeToo and Facetune, and the resulting sort of artificial imagery that comes from that. The challenge for me was to work within the constraints of the iPhone and the basic editing tools of the phone in order to create these sort of costumed self-portraits that I could safely, meaning comfortably, share in a public space. So essentially the act of editing and concealing and drawing over myself created this sense of security to publish. And what started as a pretty raw experiment like this has actually evolved into more elaborately designed performances. I have upgraded my tools. When I first started doing them, I was using my finger on my screen on my small phone. And now I work with an iPad and a pencil, but I'm still using just basic editing tools. And that upgrade in tools has allowed for more detailed and polished final performances. Recently, analog props have also made their way into the images as well. I'm interested in the way these vector costumes literally conceal and manipulate my identity. During the spring, when I was heading to Iceland, I brought many of my rituals with me so I could dive right into making. I was also really interested to see if the change in my location and the surrounding geography and my context might find their way into the making. And in this case, the shift from those red self-portraits into these white and gray sort of more minimalist self-portraits, I think definitely were impacted by that location change. I was struck by the relationship to the space, the lines, the color palette. But despite my interest in the new visual direction, once I left Iceland, I found that I couldn't work the same way on them. And the series continued to evolve into this, which is the latest sort of look of the series. The following is a quote from The Faraway Nearby by Rebecca Solnit, who is one of my favorite authors. Darkness is amorous, the darkness of passion, of your own unknowns rising to the surface, the darkness of interiors. In darkness, things merge. Merging is dangerous, at least to the boundaries and definition of the self. Darkness is generative and generation, biological and artistic both, requires this amorous engagement with the unknown, this entry into the realm where you do not quite know what you are doing and what will happen next. Creation is always in the dark because you can only do the work of making by not quite knowing what you are doing, by walking into darkness, not staying in the light. Analog narrative embraces the uncertainty of undefined process-based work through straightforward iterative mark making. From a making perspective, it's an opportunity for me to work intuitively and without purpose, using graphite on sheets of paper to simply fill space. This is an act of getting lost. And I wonder if there are indications of my day, my mood, some truth from the moments in which they are made that might make their way into the piece as a sort of graphite metadata. I number the backside of each sheet of paper and place them in a plastic bag, hanging them on the wall with T-pins. I'm also interested in the user experience here. I want the user to stare into the images and see what emerges, like staring into darkness when your eyes play tricks on you. The user brings their own mood and experiences and thoughts to the compositions. So what do they see? The collection has grown steadily over the past 3 years, and there are now approximately 85 compositions and still growing. I'm interested to look back at the work over time and see if there are any discernible patterns or moments where things may be shifted in the work. I'm also interested in the flexibility of the forms. They can be installed in a variety of ways as a layered experience, like here, time over time, or a more linear narrative, chronologically or out of order. How does the role of the installer inform the experience as well? This is another another ritual of mine that I ended up bringing to Iceland. So here you can see that the format changed a bit. I had a collection of vinyl sleeves that I was excited to use. So I adjusted the dimensions for the series while I was there. The final display for this became more of a literal timeline, though the placement of each composition or memory was arranged visually and not chronologically. I also took the pieces with me out on hikes, photographing them in the landscape. Photographing them in the landscape and testing them also with other rituals. Like here, for me, the clothesline is a ritual from my youth, from home. And there was this clothesline in the backyard of the studio where I lived. And even just using that as a way of integrating the pieces to sort of give them a fresh context was interesting to me. Also on residency, I became obsessed with vesicular basalt that was all around me. Here are some of the rocks and other materials that I collected during my explorations of the fjord. I mean, these forms just blow my mind. So I started sculpting the rocks, ultimately crafting over 600 of them, enough to fill this gallery vitrine. At the time, the objective was simply to replicate the beautiful forms in this pristine white clay as an action over time and experiment with their containment or replacement in the gallery setting. The ritual of crafting them became a bit of a discipline or perhaps a compulsion, as the satisfaction of watching the collection grow mirrored that of course, discovering new rocks during my hikes. Upon my return to Boston, my objectives with the forms shifted a bit, and they continue to shift. I'm slowly crafting more rocks. I think I'm close to 700 at this point. And I'm also spending a lot of time sanding the original 633. I find that the surface is now transforming from what was this sort of glossy finish to this smoother, to rather this velvety textured surface. Like they almost start to look and feel soft to me, which I love. So I'm excited that the body of pieces is really continuing to evolve. While in Iceland, I would also pack up the rocks and bring them with me on hikes to photograph them in the landscape. Here we have some of the rocks obviously photographed on ice. I photographed them in the dirt. And here on the same shores where I first discovered their authentic counterparts. For me, the visual disruption is super interesting. And it leads to questions of authenticity, control, and belonging. From February to April 2020, care of displacement was installed at the Yard Back Bay, showcasing multiple series that I had initiated while in Seyðisfjörður. The artwork was interlaced with immersive audio interventions that were accessible by QR codes that were placed throughout the space. And the audio was the result of a collaboration with a colleague and local media artist, Christopher Field. While in Iceland, I had been recording a lot of audio without quite knowing what I was going to do with it and how I might use it. And ultimately, Christopher took these recordings and crafted them into what you'll hear in a little bit. So the installation contains the following series. Multiple Exposures Iceland series is, and here's actually the description. A glitch is a momentary disruption that can shift alignments, alter perspective, and generate interference both in form and energy. The layering of photographic images further complicates visual information, resulting in altered realities and dreamlike meditations. Multiple Exposures Iceland series explores temporal, geographical, and emotional displacement as daily ritual, informed by the Icelandic landscape. I also want to note that these were also generated entirely on the iPhone, and all the glitches were created intentionally by shifting the camera and manipulating the ways I was capturing the actual images. The visibility of the process here, seeing the glitching in the layers, are all proof of the action. For 35mm archives family camera project, I used the family camera from my childhood, which was an Olympus quick shooter Zoom 2, to document light, motion, and ritual on 35mm film over the span of the 3 months I was in Iceland. Geological features consists of water, lots of water, various India inks on tracing paper. This series recreates the vesicular basalt surfaces through large-scale ink paintings. Materials emphasize the relational power of the Icelandic landscape. Tracing paper becomes fleshy, manipulating light and absorbing, tearing, and evolving over time to become an immersive artifact. The exhibit also included a series of typewritten letters on dot matrix paper that I had generated with bits of writing during my 3rd month in Iceland. I was only supposed to be on the residency for 2 months. And then of course, because of COVID, I was invited to stay for a 3rd month. As a result, I created this new ritual to archive the additional time I spent there. I packaged up these excerpts with numerically labeled baggies of local black sand, along with other ephemera, photography, and found objects that related to the writing. I mailed one to my address here in Boston every day for that final month I was in Iceland. A new ritual that created this sort of dialogue between my 2 homes and a reflection on the concept of home during a global pandemic. There was something really weird about being in this foreign place that felt so much more secure, especially because of its isolation, than my actual home. So this was a sort of negotiation between those two spaces. I also want to read the statement that Christopher wrote regarding the audio, because I think it adds something to the sort of full picture of the exhibit. These audio interventions are juxtapositions of collected media from a specific time and place, Iceland, February through April 2020. They are meant to provide an oral and spatial frame of reference for the visual work in the show. Some sounds might be direct documentation of what you're seeing, the sound of pencil on paper. Some might be abstracted sounds from the landscape, and some might be undecipherable, but they are all from the time and place where this work was created and offer an intimate kind of glimpse into an artist's process. Memory Device is an installation that was on display in Frame 301 Gallery at Montserrat in the fall. The installation featured 2-channel video, the geographical features, ink paintings on tracing paper, hand-sculpted clay rocks, and vinyl window graphics. It also featured a QR code with the immersive audio as well. The installation was really exciting to me because it was only viewable and accessible from the sidewalk or the street. So people could safely look into the space, but they couldn't interact with it beyond that. It also made people feel, of course, safe during COVID to be able to see the work. The QR code allowed them to scan the audio on their headphones and experience the work from the street. Additionally, the work was viewable during day and night. Light is so important and sort of cherished in Iceland. So there was something really exciting to me that this exhibit was visible both during day and night. My objective with Memory Device was to create a formal documentation of this landscape where the gallery acts as an archival container. The vinyl scribbles speak to the curation of information and the editing of memories over time. And the videos share footage from my explorations as well as crafted interpretations of that information. And I have a snippet here, it's pretty short, just giving a glimpse into the 2-channel video and a sample of the immersive audio that was played as well. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah. Don't hear the chickens though.
Staat de floor oxygen down the mask against it, place it over your nose and mouth and breathe in on. If traveling with a child, place a mask on yourself first before assisting the child.
So for some current experiments, since relocating to Midway, I've been continuing to paint the large rocks on tracing paper, but the forms are getting bigger and the nature of them is shifting a bit. I feel like things are starting to feel a little more realistic. I'm really excited to push scale again, like especially being in a space now where I can really roll out all the sheets of tracing paper. This rock right here is definitely my biggest to date. I had a 100-pound visitor on the left there, aptly named Apollo, who is in the image for a scale reference. So I'm currently building more rocks, sanding them, and testing out different methods for containing them, presenting them, preserving them. I've been conducting some vacuum seal tests with plastic, which I'm conflicted about. There's something interesting about using plastics with some of this work, and I'm kind of curious about whether it's the right direction, but I'm having fun testing. Getting some plastic, sort of like produce mesh. I'm also starting to conduct suspension tests. In the spring, there were devastating mudslides in Seyðisfjörður that really made an impact on my work and how I was sort of viewing it. There was something, it almost felt like I was exploiting the rock somehow, or the fjord by sort of framing them the way I had been. So that sort of shifted, especially in light of the condominium collapse in Miami. I really started thinking about foundations and the trust we put in our homes and in the landscapes we live in. So these are some of my current suspension tests in an attempt to sort of push that narrative further and develop the next iteration of this body of work. I was pretty excited about, ultimately, I wasn't thinking about the light at the time, but it's also really interesting to see how the light has become part of this conversation as well. Early, before I really got consumed with the clay construction of the rocks, I had been iterating a lot of different interpretations of the forms. One of the quick tests I did was simply doing some quick vector illustrations of the rocks, and I just sort of tucked that aside. But recently I've really been excited to revisit these forms. And I'm sort of looking at stage set props as a way of maybe building out larger structures and utilizing these more graphic forms that feel a lot more artificial, and thinking about ways to disrupt landscapes and place them in new settings to experiment with that. So that's something I'm just starting to think about. And last but not least, I have been developing a self-published quarterly publication as an opportunity to share insights into my studio practice, work and concepts I'm developing, to share photographs and writing, which I do a lot of writing in my work. And I just published the first issue in July. So the publication will function as yet another collection that I hope will grow over time. But it will also, I think, act as a sort of archival container for my thinking at the time. And again, like insights into what I'm getting into at the moment. So that's the last slide. I have a bunch of other sort of things that I'm chipping away at slowly. But ultimately, I think these are sort of the big focus right now. And I will say, anytime anybody has any interest in nerding out over rocks, please let me know. I welcome you. I welcome you to my studio. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It's so cool and so interesting. And
Thank you.
how matter reveals itself in so many forms and shapes and images, and interprets itself through us, because we are also part of the same matter, actually. So very engaging, so very interesting.
Thank you, Olga.
That would be so cool to see how you place it into the landscape, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I'm really, I last week I drove out to North Adams to just sort of have a mini solo escape. And I did a lot of exploring of just big open green spaces. And I'm really just kind of excited to, I think, see how I can sort of bring those pieces into it. Again, like there's something really exciting to me about how graphic and minimal like those, the prop forms would be, and to get out into real spaces. I'm also really excited to continue to bring, like Iceland is so present in my world here. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens if I start bringing these pieces, maybe the clay rocks too, out into the space here and see how they collect.
Just yesterday we visited the Greenway, and there are one little sculptures there, and the previous I thought, and there is a huge green space empty asking for sculpture right there. And not that we had a chance to come through the whole length of the Greenway, but I know that there are many sculptures and sculptors have been exploring the space. And it is a little bit closer than North Adams.
That's very true.
I don't know how to get in touch with those who curate the installations, but possibly it is possible to know. Probably one of the curators has somehow relationship with ICA, because the first painting on this arch wall that we can all see passing by, it was mentioned that curator who was working for ICA was in charge of that. So they may know. I can imagine with such a pleasure of your installation of whatever you would want to install over there within the Greenway, and I'll go there to enjoy myself. And ta-da! Kristen.
Yeah, I really, this is like a brand new revisit. I had actually put together that sort of concept for a proposal for, for an art festival in Iceland. And I had set it aside and hadn't thought of it until actually Kippy is getting rid of some really large pieces of wood. And I was like, no, I don't need them. I need to stop taking stuff from Kippy. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, of course. I'm like, wait a second, I can cut these down and maybe I should revisit that proposal. So,
Yeah.
so I think so now it's back in the front of my mind and I'm ready to dig into it.
So I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
So your work seems to be like illustration of your texts for me. It is like the extension of your descriptions, of your feelings, experience, etc. Do you think that people will get these informations just watching your art?
Do I think, well, I don't know what, I mean, I think I think the viewer will experience whatever they're going to experience. I'm not sure if, my narrative to you guys isn't necessarily something that I think is required to experience any of the pieces. And for me, I think part of what's interesting is that the viewer comes to experience the work with their own stories and their own history and their own association to certain objects and images. So I think what's interesting is the projection of their own narrative onto whatever they're seeing. So I think that's kind of what interests me. Like with thinking about my own memories and stories, I feel like they're constantly evolving and changing over time, and we forget things and we add things and we project things based on maybe who we are now. So I think, to me, there's no one way to experience any of the stories or the rituals. And if anything, people not necessarily understanding something or getting the same meaning is kind of validating, because this is my ritual that's linked to me and my personality and my actions. So it's proof of that, and it's very personal, even if it's not. Does that answer your question?
I'm just listening, because I just wonder, what would you expect from the people to see in your work without having text accompanied with that? It's a sort of what I had always problems sometimes with conceptual art, in 60s and 70s. It was sometimes very hard to read it, conceptual art, but those really ingenious conceptual pieces just let you to get into that concept after spending certain time of studying it. So I think it should be considered when somebody creates a conceptual art, how not to forget about the audience, that it's not only about my experience, but if I go and show it, it is the experience of those who are encouraged to see it. That's my little concept, comment.
Well, I think also that raises a question of, well, is there a rule that says that the writing and that sort of explanation can't be an obvious part of the work as well?
Yeah, of course.
You know, like
You
the
want to combine it with text, that's fine, you know, but there must be a big, equally sort of presented text as the image.
Well, and that's the thing, like the typewriter snippets, the letters, I think I write every day. And when I was in Iceland, the moment I got there, I started writing, and I would write all the time about whatever I was doing or what I was seeing or reflecting on my own work. And ultimately, when I got the opportunity to stay the third month, that's when I made that new ritual, and I started sort of revisiting my writing and pulling excerpts from it to type up and send. And I think even for like the care of displacement installation, we have all this imagery, we have these rocks, but I think having the letters with, like, they become an object that feels precious to me in the exhibit as a piece, but they also, I think, shed a lot of light on everything else. And even the audio, like all of that is from different experiences I had there. So even if it's not a sort of obvious, this, you know, even if we're looking at the chickens, but we're not hearing the chickens, we're hearing something else. I feel like all of those pieces are part of the experience. So it might not be something you can totally decipher, but it's still factual.
Yeah,
And
well, in the case of the letters, though, you were very sort of, you had a method, like you put it on a defunct type of printer paper. Then you used a typewriter, which might have been contemporary with that printer paper.
It wasn't.
So in a way, all of those things are evoking a certain, a memory-oriented scenario. So it is a careful construct. I think maybe, and I don't want to, I would never speak for anyone else, but there are exhibits you do go to where, you know, there's a lot of vinyl on the wall that's very instructive. And I think that's the sort of thing where you start to feel a little too directed. Yeah. Whereas the artist's intent, as you put it, is not relevant to the viewer's experience necessarily. It's kind of a conversation. Obviously, there's a work there that is yours, that the person is reacting to. So I don't know if there's ever answers to these questions. But I did want to ask you a question, sort of, because you seem very directed, very disciplined. When you were doing the small graphite drawings, right? The ones that sort of had a Polaroid format, sort of, judging from what I saw, but the ones that were before the other ones. When you first started those, see, this is a problem. This is a problem I have. When you first started those, you kind of didn't know where they would go. You kind of didn't have an intent. You kind of didn't have an idea of how they would turn out. But then as you iterate something over time, there's always the desire to direct it, to give it, to read into it a meaning of your own, and then try to with the next, as the series goes, you could try to put meaning into what was originally sort of just a sort of a free exercise. Did you find yourself wrestling with that? Did you?
I mean, not really. I mean, the most directed I've gotten is maybe in moments saying, you know, it feels good to work in a more circular pattern. So like just kind of moving, but literally beyond that, not really. I think I think maybe really concerned about even like just having any obvious imagery in there. Like I think it's kind of interesting to force myself to not even be looking at the paper, to just be sort of, you know, just working quickly in that way so much. I mean, obviously, as when I'm doing my graphic design work, everything is so intentional, and there are so many constraints. So to me, there's something just so satisfying about just, oh man, I feel like I want a really soft lead right now. And like, this is like so satisfying. Filling the space is satisfying. And by limiting the materials, by sticking to the same sizes and all of that, it really limits, I think, the ability to control things. And even the dimensions are because the first test I did were that size. And I was like, well, do I trim it down? But it fits perfectly in the baggie. There were all these sort of things, like an action that led to another action. So I said, no, I should just follow the what's unfolding. And I think the exciting part to me is I've had that on display a couple times, and each time the people are installing it are like, okay, well, how do you want to do this? And I'm like you do it, you know, like that's interesting to me, is seeing that, you know, there can be endless possibilities. The only real vision I have, kind of like the rocks, is, you know, how long into the future can I like still be interested in this and do it? Because it would be really cool to fill an entire room with all of the analogs, or to just fill an entire gallery floor with the rocks so you can't get in. I'm just, that's the vision, is to just keep going forever.
Okay. Was it, I don't want to interrupt if someone else has something to say.
I actually have something to say.
There you go.
It's sort of looking at Instagram, and I'm spending a lot of time there as I'm kind of managing the Midway. I could take your handle off and know it's your work. As it's scrolled across, I immediately know it's you. And it's interesting because I don't want to call it a brand you have, because I don't want to be corporate-y, but I know it's your work as I'm scrolling across. I could totally take off your name and know that it's something that you've done, which I think is really cool.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
I really like that I can, because I'm like, that's Kristen, that's her. I know it almost immediately. Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, Instagram, I take it seriously, but again, like I have so many little rituals like that. And again, like not all of these, well, Instagram I try to have as a daily ritual, because again, I think it's a great way to just have your work out there and show not just the work you're making, but the things that you're looking at, the things that inspire you and excite you, and references, all the things. But it's also a discipline, and like managing Instagram is hard. Like,
yes,
it's
but
hard work.
You're building a catalog of what you're doing, and you don't have to really manage that once it's up there. And that's the great part about it, you know? That's the nice part about it.
And I also love that you're forced, well, not forced, but I love managing, like, okay, what's the caption for this? What language is appropriate? And even hashtags. I don't use the hashtags to like, really, like, why am I using it? Because I'm obsessed with systems of documenting and archiving. And to me, the hashtags are just another way of attaching labels and to the sort of digital file cabinet. And that also interests me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say that I think what was interesting to me, and I think that's probably because you're a good teacher, is how much intention you put into all the pieces of what you described. Because I wouldn't have guessed that from just seeing it, right? That the notion of containment and, you know, archiving, and that all the aspects of what your work is has intent. And it's very interesting to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have some comments, not a question. First, I wish to say to you, I really appreciated your student show. Thank you for bringing it here.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me bring it here, everyone.
Yeah. I visited it a number of times slowly and appreciated it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And then the second thing is we were, let's see. Oh, I was up on the 6th floor returning some pots to Kippy because she asked us to plant her geraniums in the garden outside. And I was quite taken by, I don't know if you said you're making them on tissue paper. They are they're, I think out in the hallway, there was a large stone. I think of it as a stone. Yes.
Yeah, on tracing paper. Yeah.
On tracing paper.
Mhm.
It's so highly evocative. I had such a strong response to it. Now you're talking to a person who loves stones, who loves the wind, who loves the soil, who responds to the wind, you know, all of this. But I just wanted to say that I stopped. It just took my breath away. And it's as much your choice of the tissue paper, tracing paper, as well as did you use Indian ink? Yeah, that's what I thought. It looked like that was Indian, the way so thank you for that. And Kippy gifted us with not only her geraniums that are in the garden, but stones that she collected over a period of time here. And she asked me to put them in the garden. She left them in a box and said, I'm not going to take these with me. So I wanted to say that they're nothing like what you're doing. They're not in your scale, your work. However, you know, you're a stone person. Let's just name this one. All right. And so they're spread out on one of the tables with the sawhorse legs that's near where the potting soil is, straight away out of the door. I have a number of them spread there. And then I have 2 stone bowls that I decided was the way to keep them. And that's over on the little side shelf there where the potting soil is. And you are welcome. I invite you to take a break at some point from your work, go through them. And if there's anything in there that's got your name on it, well, then it's got your name on it. All right.
Oh, thank you so much.
They're quite beautiful. I'll spend more time with them. You can see that she is individually selected on walks and in memories and has left the energetic imprint, which is quite beautiful. I'm very interested over time to continue to have this conversation and watch the evolution of the conversation of the intersection between word and visual image. I am not so interested in, is it visual image that is first and then is the word, and is the word description? What is it? I'm interested in the intersection point between that for us humans. And I feel it in the description that you gave us here. I feel it sort of happening that way. While some of it's very structured, I love field notes. So, you know, I teach writing to artists at Mass Art. So you need to understand where that's coming from. It's like, wow, nice. You know, I love the manual type, love many, many things about your very specific choices, but I'm looking forward to over time, a set of conversations that I don't hear artists talk about, and that's the intersection point between word and visual image. And I think you're there, which is why I'm saying this aloud to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those comments. I really appreciate it. And also for the invitation to check out the rocks. I definitely need to wander down there. I will say, like, watching the evolution of that space has been so lovely, because I always look down. I think sometimes I see you down there planting the things. I contemplate yelling and being like, it looks great, but like, seriously, it's beautiful down there. Thank you. I appreciate your comments so much. And I'm super curious to learn more about what the whole writing, teaching conversation as well, what you're doing.
Yeah. It's okay to yell down there. It's happened.
Yeah.
People that have opened up their window and yelled out the window to say, I donated a pot. Danny put it on the other side over here. The soil's not good, but I said, but the pot's good, right? You know, and then he walked to me. I don't remember even his name. He was hanging out the window and yelling at me and walking me to where the pot was. So it's okay to yell out the window.
Good
That's,
to know.
that's as much fun as people walking their dogs and stopping to have a moment.
Sounds good.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Like, you know, I watch a lot of TV shows from Iceland, you know, because they're always so grisly and gruesome. but I'm wondering, what is it like to live, like, what is it like to be there? Because the earth, the dirt's black, everything's volcanic. It's kind of like a different, the eye's not seeing what it's used to. Did that affect how you, somehow, whatever?
It changed my life, Peter. Yes. It's like it literally the whole time I was there, I'm not lying. I would just walk around and just be like, oh my God, like I'm on another planet. It really, it really does feel like another planet. And I had the opportunity. So where I was, like I said, small village. I probably saw 20, like the same 20 people the whole time I was there. 20 might be a lot. And I was there during the winter season. So, well, when I started there, it was like, shorter days, like quiet. And most people, it seemed, were in hibernation. And by the last month, it was like still daylight. You could see light at midnight, 3 a.m, and 4, I think, in the morning, the sun was coming up. It was just like it was unreal. Even just seeing the light, I got to see the northern lights, which blew my mind. There's a real sense of like scale, which is probably why I'm so excited to just keep working bigger and bigger, because you're just constantly feeling like there's all this trust for the mountain and your surroundings, because it's so much bigger than you and more powerful. And like at one point, a friend of mine came to visit, and I was able to rent a car and drive. I pretty much drove 3/4 of Iceland, like the full loop, which I would not have done alone, because storms will come like this and you can't see anything. And it's like, take the worst snowstorm we've ever had here and multiply it times like 100. It's like so scary. But yeah, it's amazing. I truly feel like it was another planet. And I'm almost afraid to go back in the summer when things are thawed and green, because I just can't imagine it being as magical. Like everything almost feels blue because it's so white. It's so much snow, and I just love it so much. I can't even.
That resonates. Daryl and I spent 3 days there once, and it was exactly as you describe. It's a very, very different place to be, and it affects your thinking, just the way the landscape is.
It really does. And I mean, I'm not really super pumped about super cold weather, but man, every day I was like, time to suit up and go for a hike. And I took this, like, I was in the same area, like walking, and every day for 3 months, I was just like, this is unreal. I think I can see why artists flock there. And like I said, it really does feel like you're in space.
I just mentioned to you in your personal chat an artist friend of ours from Nantucket who spends a lot of time there.
Oh, thank you.
And you two should meet sometime. But we were there in March and it wasn't quite so cold. But
yeah, I think I'm pretty sure like right after I left, I was already scheming and submitting proposals and trying to get back. But yeah, it would be nice to go there in the beautiful weather. And it's interesting. A lot of like the analog composition started when I was still in grad school, and I'm really, like I said, obsessed with Rebecca Solnit. And I had randomly stumbled upon this residency that took place in Sadist Theater that was called Wanderlust. And it was like a 2-week residency in collaboration between Scaffell and a photo studio there called Stromden. And it was all based on Rebecca Solnit's writing. And I just find so magical, because that was the person inspiring so much of my like thinking at the time, and still. And that's how I even started looking at Theater. I didn't go for that residency, but it was kind of like what pulled me over there. And I just felt like it was so serendipitous.
Cool.
Just a side note.
I think our impetus was much more common. It was Bjork,
Nice. That's a good one.
whom we actually ran into there, which was kind of
Oh my God, that's awesome.
unbelievable.
Seriously.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. It was not just lovely, it was so unreachable, if I can make up the English word to describe what I myself has been experiencing. And the talks are so good. And I enjoyed listening to every single person who talked today. But
Thanks. It was
I
really
am
great. Really
so
great.
I'm so thankful to everyone.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my work, and it was so nice to sort of hear what everybody had to say. Seriously, if you want to ever talk about rocks more, just let me know.
Oh, rocks are great. Rocks are so beautiful, whatever rocks they are. No matter if they're diamonds or the rock that you pick up on the road. I don't see any difference between them, except that
Even locally.
the
Like,
beauty is that.
I recently walked, I mean, I'm obviously still pretty new to this neighborhood, and walking down to even Castle Island, there's like, I mean, this good stuff out there.
Oh, I have number of
so
them picked up from the
Massachusetts
from
has
the
the best
channel.
rocks in the world. The best.
Oh, well,
Look,
thank you, thank you.
concept of rock. When I visited Houston, and there is that museum of Apollo, and they brought that rock from moon, and you can see it. It looks like the average rock, but since it's attached of the concept that it's from the moon, suddenly it got completely different dimension. You know? People are staring at the average rock, but because it's from the moon, so they are fascinated. You know, so it's so funny.
That's the power of concept. You just talked about it, Milan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I don't know if only by watching that rock from moon, you will get that concept of that it is from the moon. That's my problem. You have to,
that's the question.
You know, it's a little bit different, you know. The thing, you know.
It's history. It's like any experience. The rock had that experience of being on the moon.
So some rocks have, you know, concept like diamonds. You know?
Well,
it's a concept of value, you know, for rich pigs and capitalism.
Well, there are other stories. I mean, obviously, the volcanic rocks in Iceland totally shaped. You know, that is literally what that island is made of, and it's not that ancient.
right.
And then up in like Vermont and places where you would least expect it, you find very smooth stones. And those stones were created by the glacial, when the glaciers broke, and they would just polish the stones as they moved forward. But the actual manifestations of the glaciers beside those rocks is hard to see in that place. In Maine, it's a lot easier. So there are histories to these aesthetics and so on. And if you know, want to look at them, it's there, you know. And then like in Boston, I do think that a lot of the rocks on the shore were ballast rocks from the ships that came in from the trades, whatever it may be. All sorts of things out there, all sorts of stuff going on, man.
I agree. For example, look, me as the anarchist, when I hold a cobblestone, which is stone shaped by humans to the cubic, and I hold it only, it's a concept. Because it is like a revolution, throw it against, you know, on the barricades, you know. So the cobblestone has a conceptual sort of a message only by itself.
See?
In the hand of the human in the human hand, the cobblestone for me is immediately readable sort of a concept of a stone.
Right. So you would classify yourself more political than an actual geologist.
I know, but I don't
All
know
right. So
artists.
this is a lovely thing. Lovely thing.
And I just want to point out, though, as a side note, if somebody said this rock is from the moon, I would be very excited to hold it. Just saying.
Bravo, Kristen.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much again. This was so fun.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
And we will see you next time. And next time will be Saucer.
Yes, ciao.
Goodbye, everyone.
Be revolutionary.
Yes, sure, Milan. Of course. With you as a
Revolutionary
leader,
capitalism.
you're gonna lead us.
And then get a nice coffee.
Yeah, use cobblestones. Cobblestones. We need more cobblestones.
They're all under there. They're all out there. This whole
They're
Yeah,
waiting.
under-
They're waiting for us.
Outside after the asphaltos, we have an endless supply of cobblestones when the revolution comes.
Yeah, let's throw them at something.
Oh, it is like the end of the world that Nostradamus predicted, right?
Let's throw them at the post office.
Oh, that'll
Ah,
help it.
what about
Banking
buildings?
buildings, very useful. Cobblestones, against the
That
banking
gets so
windows.
violent for my vegetarian taste. I'm gonna wish you all good night.
Good
Ciao.
Thank you so very much. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Stop recording, no?
Yeah, it'll stop or else share.
Oops, it is.
That was great. Good night, guys.
Hey, good night. Ciao.
Good night, Emmy.
We were
Amy.
sorry, we were eating dinner.
Oh, that's good.
whole
Oh, you came just on time.
I missed, well, sorry.
Careful, we're recording. We
I
still
missed the very beginning. Oh,
it's going to be in posterity.
uh-oh. Ooh, Hannah, I like your dress.
Hey.
How do you stop it?
It looks like Kristen's work.
Hi, Amy.
Oh,